to get started on tonight. Welcome to Baggage Claim tonight. And in all of our episodes, you get an opportunity to unpack your bags with Dr. Danita. And so, a few things that I just share at the beginning of the segment is that although these series are, I'm a mental health professional, and I just need people to know that these series are specifically for educational purposes and just to bring awareness as to how these topics can potentially affect the mental health, your mental health. They are not meant to substitute professional counseling. And so, if in any of these episodes you feel that you potentially maybe feeling some of the effects of trauma that we talk about at times, or feeling some of the anxiety, depression, or some of those mental health challenges that people can very easily deal with when we talk about the various racial experiences and racism, trauma, and things like that, do reach out to a professional. And so tonight, our topic is focused on systemic racism and education. And I have two amazing guests on tonight. And again, if you are just coming in, please do please do share it with all of your friends and family on your social media page, and give those thumbs up and the hearts. And throughout this evening, if you have things to share, I am going to do my best to highlight some of the comments that you made. So just be interactive with us tonight. I am pleased to bring on my two guests on this evening talking about systemic racism and education. We have with us Joanne Johnson and Brandon Wright. Hi, Joanne.
Hi.
And
Good
hi,
evening.
Brandon. Hi, Brandon.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for coming on. So I'm just going to give Joanne an opportunity to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about about what you do, Joanne.
Thank you, Dr. Danita. My name is Joanne Johnson. As you see on the screen, I am an education professional. I have been working in education for over 25 years. Currently, I am a curriculum supervisor and program director for K-12 science and social studies in one of our local school districts here in Burlington County. I have a master's degree in secondary education, as well as a certificate in social studies secondary education. In addition, I have a master's degree in education administration, and I have worked as a vice principal, department chairperson at the secondary middle school level, as a high school guidance counselor, and now, as I shared with you before, my current role is as a program planner, project manager, and curriculum supervisor for K-12 science and social studies. Thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to the opportunity to engage with you all this evening.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Clearly, you are well qualified to speak on the topic of this evening. And Brandon, tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Okay, my name is Brandon Wright. I am the Assistant Director of Academic Coaching. I've been working in higher education for about 5 years, so my tenure is not nearly as long as Ms. Johnson's. But also, I have a master's in education and higher education, and I am one semester away from completing my PhD in education. So, yeah, thank you for having me tonight, Dr. Danita. I look forward to this conversation.
Awesome, Brandon. Clearly, education is a passion of yours since you have pursued such higher learning. And congratulations on your
Thank you.
education journey.
Mhm.
Looking forward to being able to celebrate with you.
Yes.
Right. So, I was reading an article on edweek.org, And it was talking about how the pandemic and everything that is going on in our country has really just changed everything. And then they talked about part of that change being the exposure of the deep fault lines in our nation's education and in our nation's school system. And so the article was talking about how a new awareness seems to be emerging. I don't think that it's very new. These are we have always known that we've had significant fault lines in our education system, but the article was talking about new awareness emerging and how the country is coming into a reckoning of where our education system is as it relates to racism. And so educators are beginning to rethink curriculum and promote Black experience, as well as helping students to understand or to challenge this concept of dominance of whiteness. And so as I began to think about this particular article that I was reading, yesterday happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that teachers and educators and parents were all just watching in bewilderment, in sheer horror, and really disgust at what was happening yesterday at the Capitol building. And I thought, wow, as these educators are now thinking about challenging white dominance, what a good opportunity. This was white supremacy, white dominance at its best yesterday. So, what are your thoughts about? And this was one of the questions. This was tonight's question in reference to children watching. And when parents don't always think about their children and they kind of put these traumatic things on replay, and they jump from one station to the next station to the next station to the next station, and it's just playing and playing and playing. And so I know that children were, significantly exposed to this event yesterday. What are your thoughts about what kind of experience that this may have been for children? How should teachers have handled it today as first responders?
Do you mind if I take that one first? Is that okay?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, so usually when we are dealing with traumatic events, one of the things that we work to do is ensure that we provide our staff with talking points and the opportunity to have conversations themselves so that they can then plan how they are going to engage with students. So in addition to providing them with resources and talking points, we also rely on them and their experience as professionals to facilitate current events conversations with an eye towards being aware of the trauma that students can experience when they observe violence on television or hear it on the radio or hear it in music, etc.
Okay. Brandon, did you want to? I know that you're not necessarily a K-12, and my question was in reference to children. But if you wanted to weigh in there.
Yeah, definitely. When you think about the college experience and you're bringing in a multiplicity of students into one central setting, there are going to be cultural differences. There are going to be political differences. And when things like this happen, you have to think, so what is next week going to look like when all of our students are back on campus and this has happened? Specifically at a predominantly white institution that may be in the South. How will some students who might have expressed that they were Trump supporters and had things in their windows saying that they support Trump, and then marginalized populations of students who are also coming back on campus, you have to think of their safety as well as how are they going to function in this environment and what could possibly happen on a college campus when you bring these different types of students back. So that's one conversation that's been being had today on the higher education front with some of my colleagues that work in housing, that work on the academic affairs side, is how are we going to mitigate something if, if anything happens on campus in relation to yesterday's event.
Yeah, I can just imagine the educators' challenge with, well, let's take it from, with children. I can imagine the educators' challenge when children come back to school with ideologies that were poured into them all evening by their parents for or against, or um, any ideologies that are not based on facts, and just the attempt to mitigate that with a classroom full of children that may be coming into the classroom with different thoughts about what happened based on how their parents communicated to them. Do either of you have any thoughts about that?
Actually, I do, yes. One of the things that actually we were speaking about before the conversation, the video conversation started this evening, was the importance of teaching children how to think critically
Mm-hmm.
and how to craft opinions based on facts and their understanding and interpretation of those facts. So, as K-12 educators, based on the developmental capacity of the student, we do work to try to help them, whether it's in a primary environment, to be kind, to be listeners, to be respectful. And then as we move up into the secondary environment, we delve more deeply, of course, because they're more mature, into how to think critically. What are the facts? Where is your evidence? What are the resources that you're using? Are those resources that you're using credible? How do you determine if a source is credible or not? So, as K-12 educators, we do our best to try to teach children how to craft opinions carefully based on facts and proper research. And in an environment where emotions are high, that can be extremely difficult to do, but it is always a priority for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine.
Mhm.
I wonder how long this historical moment will take to actually reach the textbooks, and when it reaches the textbooks, how it will be presented. I'm just
Mhm.
curious. And as a curriculum developer and in social studies, I don't really know the process and how that works in terms of how long it takes historical moments to reach the text, but I would really be curious as to how it would be presented. When we think about going back to that article that I read, and talking about the educators looking to better equalize and improve the educational experience for Black students, one of the things that they were sharing was that they lacked tools, they lacked the resources, they lacked the curriculum support. The practices and the policies are not there, and have not been there for so long. Black students have been denied those same opportunities that white students have, which enable them to thrive. And so,
Mhm.
delving now into our topic for this evening, systemic racism and education. Let's start with the definition. How are we defining systemic racism in education? And then if you could just share some of those opportunities and experiences that Black students tend to be deprived of, or have long been denied of, that their white counterparts have been afforded.
Mhm. Did you want to take that one first, Brandon, or shall I?
Sure, sure. When I look at systemic racism, it's something that has been rooted within our country, that has evolved, that has progressed to against marginalized communities, and for us, Black students. one of the things that I oftentimes think of is when it comes down to opportunities that a lot of my white counterparts had, such as SAT prep, such as being able to go to these different type of functions and be privy to conferences and things, even in high school and college, that I wasn't privy to. And it was just because, those things, or those systems, or those resources were in place that were benefiting them. But also, you, as a Black student, you had to work a little bit harder to make sure that you weren't saying the wrong thing, or that you were not writing the wrong thing, or you were showing that I have something to say, I know the way to say it, but allow me the opportunity to say it outside of the color of my skin. And so that goes to a whole nother thing of like stereotype threat. Black students, or students of color, having to work harder to battle, the rigors of academic success, but also being able to put up that wall, or that front of, you can go to code switching, or I don't want to say anything that's going to be indicative of a stereotype related to my race. And I want to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward. And these are the systems that have been put into place that a lot of students, especially Black students or students of color, have to combat with, in addition to being academically successful in school, whether it's K through 12 or whether it's higher education.
Right. Yeah. Joanne?
I would agree, and and if I may, as a history teacher, I want to just talk about the fact that systemic racism in education is a byproduct of systemic racism in the foundation of our nation. So when you look at racism from a historical perspective, when we start looking at the 13th Amendment, which freed slaves, the 14th Amendment, which told us that we had equal rights under the law, and then the 15th Amendment, which gave us access to the vote. And then, of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1875 that was designed to help build from Reconstruction a more perfect union. And then all of it falls apart when Andrew Johnson becomes president of the United States. He vetoes the Civil Rights Act twice. He pardons the Confederate generals. He pardons the leadership of the Confederate South. And then we have 100+ years of Jim Crow. So we look at separate but equal transportation, quote, separate but equal.
Right.
Separate transportation, separate education, separate housing, lower incomes, unequal compensation for the same work, denied access to proper housing, denied access to loans at the same rate as our white counterparts. So our nation is built on racism and the separation of Black people from the rest of American society. So it stands to reason then that our education system is racist, because
Right.
our nation is inherently racist. It's like when you go to build a house, and we're talking about how strong the foundation needs to be. Well, if the foundation is rotten, the house is going to eventually fall in on itself,
Right.
I look at it from that perspective, and it certainly is a challenge for us as educators of color, to try to work within that system, which is inherently designed to keep us from achieving excellence.
Yeah. And just what you're saying there, to piggyback off of the system being designed to keep us from achieving excellence, it's interesting. I personally grew up in a white school district.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole goal, of course, of my parents was that I would get a better education. Okay. And so while I'm thinking about this better education, I was listening to a professor at Rutgers that my daughter had as in her Africana Studies class, and he was talking about how education needs to be individualized, and we talk about that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm a former educator, so we talk
Mm-hmm.
about individualized instruction. But really, when we think about individualized instruction, it is nowhere near meeting the needs of the Black student in any way. And so he talked about the education system, the curriculum primarily being designed for the maintenance of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even though I grew up in a white neighborhood, I was powerless. I grew up in, a white school district. I still didn't have power. So I'm sitting there under the same education that, is across the country. But I'm sitting there with all of these students who did not look like me, who were being taught to maintain power, but I wasn't being taught how to gain power.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And our system does not teach us how to gain power. In essence, we're really powerless if we think about the fact that everything that is owned that we need is owned by white people. How is it? We really are not homeowners by and large. We don't own the power system, light and gas. We don't own, we depend on white man's ownership for our clothing, our food, shelter, internet service, gas, all of it. And so we're not being taught. I wasn't being taught how to gain power.
Mm-hmm.
I was just sitting there with those who already had it, and they were being taught how to maintain it.
Right.
And so the disparities were just it just, you said, Joanne, 100 years. It just continues to,
Continue.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And so, with that, with all of the disparities and the years and years and years and years of Black students not being able to attain what they needed to be ultimately, as a collective, successful. Because, of course, we know we have our group of those who are more privileged in the Black community, but as a collective, with us not really receiving what we needed, what are your thoughts about public schools, the public school system owing Blacks reparations?
Mm-hmm.
Brandon, you want to start?
Sure. I don't want to be that guy, but just my honest opinion, there will never be an amount of money to pay to forgive, what has been done throughout all generations. But when you look at Germany, the Holocaust victims, they were able to receive reparations.
Right.
You look at Colombia, and victims there have been able to receive reparations. Even when you look in the United States, the indigenous people have been able to receive reparations in, the form of having reservations and even their own institutions. So why not Black people? Or
Right.
why not Black students? Due to the years of slavery, due to the years, as Miss Johnson, Dr. Johnson said, of Jim Crow. Why not? So definitely yes. And then on the flip side, there will never be enough money or a suitable amount of money to forgive or to serve some type of reciprocity for what has been, given, or what has happened to Black people in slavery and even in education.
Right. Right. Joanne, what are your thoughts there?
I would agree, actually, and I will also share a quote. I'm a big reader, and I read all types of genres. And one of my favorite science fiction authors, there's a quote from one of her books, and she says, "When the purses of the few grow fat, the wisdom of the many is stunted."
Mm.
And that has stayed with me and resonated with me as an educator, So when we talk about reparations, and I'll just reference here in New Jersey where I am, we know we have the Abbott decision here, Abbott versus Burke. That was in 1981. Then we had Abbott 2, which was in 1990. And we're talking about the expenditure disparities between poor urban school systems versus suburban school systems.
Mhm.
Now, that was a judgment against the state, because the formulas that the state was using clearly disenfranchised or undereducated children of color and poor children in urban and rural areas of the state here in New Jersey. And now that's in 1990.
Wow.
And we still don't have equal access to the dollars necessary in public school, period. Public schools we are behind. We're behind in technology. We can't keep up with the trends as technology grows and advances. In private schools that are well funded, they've got iPads and touch screens, and we're still trying to teach kids how to type on a keyboard.
Right.
So there are multiple levels of disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And then, of course, there are additional disparities between people of color, Black people and brown people, and white people. So absolutely, we should receive reparations. The system certainly owes us that at a bare minimum.
Yeah. I was thinking that during this pandemic, the falling behind, in my mind, it would become greater and greater and greater as you talk about not having the necessary technology. I'm sure children in inner cities, while they may have been given a tablet or something to be able to be in school virtually, they're struggling with having internet and
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
and a desk to sit at, or
Yes.
just all of those necessary things that they need in order to be able to thrive throughout the day educationally. Um, yeah, Brandon, I agree with you. There's no dollar amount that can be provided for us. But I'm thinking of just some things. Like, I was listening today to a speaker, and he was talking about how HBCUs are on life support.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Some money to the historical Black colleges and universities to help them. They're producing a huge portion of the working class, and so give money there, or free. For how about some free college education? That will help. And so
Mm-hmm.
just things in that area. Black students, college students, are coming out of school with such high debt, and
Yes.
they're not knowing, what to do. Their debt is higher than their credit card debt, of course, and not getting the jobs. They're going into working class, kind of working poor situations,
Mm-hmm.
and their school debt is so much higher than what they can afford to be able to pay these bills. And so, yeah, how about giving some money there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, another question that I was, when I was reading the specific article about the awareness that educators are coming to, they talked a little bit about affirmative action and the thoughts about whether that we should maintain the policies of of affirmative action as it relates to getting into colleges. And so, what are your thoughts about that? Affirmative action programs that have been designed to ensure students of color would be able to have a fair chance in being accepted into colleges.
As a former high school guidance counselor, I can share with you that I would absolutely continue to support affirmative action. And by that, I mean, students should have access. They should have the opportunity to have access. And because we know that the system is flawed, one of the few ways that we can continue to work to address those flaws is by ensuring that the programs that we've put in place are being followed by states, universities, public schools, private schools, to ensure the opportunity for access. Because we know that children coming out of urban and rural environments are still going to school in public school settings that are not on par with their suburban counterparts.
Right.
So one way for us to ensure that we're providing at least access is through those types of programs.
Yeah. I find that there's just programs, and more programs, but who is actually ensuring that these programs are being put into action? The things, that the line items in these programs, is it really coming to fruition for who it was designed for?
Well,
programs.
at the risk of being political right now, no one, because Betsy DeVos is in charge of the Department of Education. So, just saying.
Just saying.
I will agree with Dr. Johnson that it allows access, and a lot of students sometimes they view them as just a checkbox. But the access is just the first step. But are there systems or are there programs in place to assist these students? Because you have to look, most of those students are first generation college students. They don't know what a registrar or a bursar's office is. They don't know what academic probation or suspension is. These are low socioeconomic students. So it's one thing, it's almost like a bait and hook sometimes with universities. I'll use that as a checkbox or to become a minority serving institution to receive those extra funds, but there aren't any programs in place to ensure the success and the retention and the persistence of these students. So like I said, I hate to be that guy, but I see the positive side, but I also know the reality of that as well.
Yeah. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking about growing up in a white school district, and with my parents thinking that was, what was going to catapult me or move me forward or whatever. Yes, I did continue and further my education, but I remember an experience that I had with a guidance counselor, and I'm piggybacking off of what Brandon said earlier, how he didn't have he didn't have that significant guidance that was needed. And so I was thinking about what this guidance counselor said to me when I was filling out college applications. She says, I was filling out an application. I wanted to go to Fordham. And she specifically said to me, "You're not going to get into Fordham." And I was a pretty solid student. And I was so deflated with those words, and I didn't apply. And I went to a decent college, but she literally said to me, "You're not going to get into Fordham. Don't waste your family's money on that application, because that's not a school that you're going to get into."
I share that experience with you. I remember sitting in my high school guidance counselor's office years ago, and him talking to me about taking business classes so that I could become a secretary. And I told him, I'm not going to take business courses. I need to take college prep courses because I'm going to college. Who told you that? And I went home and told my mom. And let's just say that was the end of that conversation. Because, and I was blessed with that sense of security that I knew that I needed to go home and tell my mother what that man said to me.
Yeah.
And ensure that she knew what she needed to be aware of and watch out for. and ensure that I was registered for the right courses during my high school career so that I could apply to the colleges that I was interested in.
Right.
And
And
it's
so, go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
no, I just found it interesting that both of you shared that story. In some reading I was doing, a lot of African Americans, until it's become like a type of theory called the prove them wrong syndrome,
Mhm.
that so many minority students, or as people are saying, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, have experienced someone in academic authority telling them, don't apply there, you won't be able to get into there, that it's become a syndrome within the African American or the marginalized communities that I have to do this, but then it comes a thing of proving them wrong, that I do have the ability or the academic capacity to succeed in whatever area that you've deemed that I can't achieve in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I gained confidence later. I didn't have it as much as I needed it then. And Joanne, you're saying that you had a mom that you went home and you told the story to, and that was it. My mom, at that time, although she was educated, a high school graduate, she didn't have all of what it took to give me that, you go and you take this class and you take that class. I basically had to come home and say to her, well, I need to do this and I need to do that. Can I do this? Can I do that?
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't able to give me that kind of guidance. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what we experience as well. Parents
Yes.
that can't give us the guidance that we need in order to, be able to combat or overcome some of those negative experiences that we have with those that we look up to in academia.
Yes.
Yeah. So when we think about going actually into the school building and talking about the daily experiences, so we talked more about the systemic things, but when we like actually go into the classroom and we think about some of those daily experiences, as I was reading, there was a discussion for and against the idea of having the school resource officers in the
Mm-hmm.
school building. They're called SROs. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are many students of color that experience daily going through metal detectors, being met by police officers. And this is how they start their day, as if they
Mm-hmm.
are going into some sort of criminal or jail. How about that?
Mhm.
This
Mm-hmm.
is how they start their day. And so there was discussion for and against, do we, should we really have these SROs in the school buildings with our children? And then others were like, yes, this is great. This is the best thing. Making these connections with the school resource officers, connecting with children and bringing community together. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, as social media consumers, I think that many of us have seen video after video after video
Mm-hmm.
of the SRO, the school police officer, violating our children, children of color, grabbing them by their braids, yoking them up against walls, handcuffing them, tasing them, pepper spraying them in the course of a school day. Unfortunately, those images are the most prevalent ones that we see of SROs in school communities. Now, my personal experience is the exact opposite of that. But I believe the reason why that is because as a school system, we specifically designed the role of the SRO before they ever came into our schools. And we, as school administrators, are always in charge on the school grounds, unless there is God forbid, a school shooter or a bomb threat. In those cases, we do we are overridden by our school police and our local police. But in our day-to-day operations, we don't have police going into classrooms and dragging children out and grabbing them out of desks and things of that nature. We don't allow that because as administrators, we are in charge and we're supposed to be advocates for the children. We're supposed to be, their parents in loco parentis, and in the absence of the parent, we are supposed to act as those children's parents. So I do fault the school administrators in all of those situations where they allow school resource officers to basically get away with abusing and assaulting their students. My SROs are great. They are mentors. They're outside playing with the children. They take pictures with them. They dress up for Halloween. They eat lunch with them in the cafeteria. They read stories to them at story time. And we are trying to build community partnerships and community relationships so that every child knows at least 2 officers on the force. And so when they see them in the community, at the grocery store, at the mall, they high five them and have conversations with them because they're a part of their school community. Unfortunately, I don't know that my experience is the norm based
Right.
on what I see in the media.
You have an ideal situation there,
Mhm.
and it is based on what the original design for
Yes.
SROs was supposed to be, which is I think a very good idea.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, it's not the norm, not for our children.
Yes.
What are you thinking, Brandon?
I can agree with Dr. Johnson. My experience in middle school, we did have to walk through a metal detector going to class, but the SROs there were, well, for middle school and high school, were 2 African American males that I knew who were friends of the family. And so having that familiar face, and then we never had any major things as, students being tased, being violently harmed or anything like that. But as Dr. Johnson said, in the media, what we're seeing now is something totally different, and that's foreign to the experience that I had. Now, on the college campus, we do have DPS officers who, in my opinion, although our task force is, I would say, 97% white, they do make an effort to build connections and build relationships with all of our students. But you have to look at on the larger scale. This is a unique situation compared to what's actually happening in public schools at large.
Mhm.
Right, right. And what's actually happening, from what I can see, is, in my opinion, perpetuating the school to prison pipeline, right?
Yes.
You have these officers who are throwing these kids on the ground and then charging them with assault. Kids are being charged with assault for things that back in the day when we had our schoolyard, well, I didn't because I didn't really fight like that, but when when I saw other kids having their schoolyard brawls or whatever, they fought. Teachers were there. They watched them. They got up. They dusted themselves off, got their book bags, and went back to class. Now everything is assault. Everything is handcuffed. Everything is now you got a record. And so, what are your thoughts about the whole concept of school to prison pipeline? And to be honest, it doesn't just start in high school. We have preschoolers being expelled at high numbers. How do you expel preschoolers?
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Right.
what are your thoughts about the school to prison pipeline?
It's our unfortunate reality. Our foundation is rotten. So until that is rectified, we will continue to see the disparities in all aspects of how we live here in America. Again, because our foundation is rotten. So yes, absolutely. Children are charged with criminal offenses. Children are suspended from school. Children are expelled from school. Children are placed on home instruction, and there's no follow up. But I have a charge for for our community and for your YouTube community. Parents must absolutely must go to school board meetings. Parents
Yeah.
must go to town council meetings and engage in the process of establishing policy, because policy supports what these people, the offenders, are being able to get away with. Like I said, we do not abdicate control of our school to the school resource officer, but clearly in many, many cases, that is exactly what is happening, and children are being criminalized unfairly. But that starts with us ensuring that the policies that are being developed by school districts, our school districts, are proportionate to the needs of our students, that they're designed to help and uplift them, not criminalize them.
Yeah, I think because collectively there's such limited education among Black and Brown parents that they're intimidated. And you say, you know, they should go to the school board, they should show up at those meetings, but I think that there is a high level of intimidation due to lack of education and lack of awareness of the power that they actually do have.
They've also experienced trauma themselves.
Yes.
They've been used in the school environment.
Mm-hmm.
So that also is an added a bag, if you will.
Right.
They're carrying around with them, which makes it difficult for parents that have experienced school trauma, school injustice, assault, segregation, separateness, discrimination. It's difficult for them to then be quality advocates for their children because of that trauma. It's a form of PTSD, and as Black people, we all, in my humble opinion, walk around with some level of it attached to us on a regular basis.
Right, which is the focus of these particular lives, understanding how that racism traumatizes us, and many people don't understand the level of trauma that they are living with because it has become their norm.
Yes.
Wow.
So, in keeping with being in the school building, I talked about the SROs being in the school building, and Joanne, you shared what the ideal situation is and how positive your experience is, and Brandon, the positive experience you have as well. There are so many experiences that our Black children go throughout the day, whether it's encountering the SROs or being sent to the guidance counselor or sitting in class and not being able to necessarily relate to the information that is being taught, to sitting in the English class. This is where I'm gonna settle, to sitting in their English class, having a literacy experience, so to speak, but their true sense of communication, or the way in which Black children communicate, being silenced and not being celebrated at all, being told that we absolutely have to conform to the Western, the dominant, the standard English that they are being taught on a daily basis. What are your thoughts about that? The silencing of our children in their English classroom.
Well, I can give a higher education perspective. So, you know, freshman students, when they come to the university, they take typical English 101 and then English 102. And I know I was approached by a professor, and I think this was the second year that I was at a particular institution, and she mentioned, she was a Caucasian lady, and she said, I don't know how to take some of the Black kids serious with the way that they speak. And so I already knew where she was kind of going with it. But I asked, so what are you saying? Well, I know Gullah Geechee it's considered a language, but when it comes down to them speaking in class and when they're presenting, I don't know what to take from that. I don't know how to score them. And so, being a young professional, I didn't respond in the correct way. I'll say that. But being that in the physical area that I am, the geographic area rather, that I am, Charleston and then the Beaufort Sea Islands are right there. So a lot of those students we enroll who speak the Gullah Geechee language, so to speak. And it go even to Black vernacular. So many professors, well, why are they dropping the G off? What's coming? What's going? What is all of this? And that's just a part of how, the children speak or Black children communicate. And then being an African American person, one far and in between, it all gets dumped to us. Well, what does that mean? How does that go? And then students are scored lower when it comes down to presentations and being able to get up in front of other students in a public communication class just because they're not enunciating their words correctly. And by no means necessary, am I saying lower standards, but take into consideration the diversity of speech.
Right, right. And why would it be necessarily considered lowering standards? Why can't we celebrate and value the deep rooted history of the culture, and because language is culture.
Right.
And so if we talk about this celebrating and recognizing various people and their cultures, why isn't the Black language, why isn't Gullah Geechee, why couldn't she say something like, wow, what a beautiful dialect, and and ask questions about the history of the dialect, than to say, oh, I can't take them seriously.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
What is your experience, Joanne, with the younger students?
Well, part of my responsibility is to coach teachers, whether they are new to the craft or have been in industry for a number of years or decades. And one of the things that I find myself going back to over and over again was the information that they conveyed correct? Was it accurate? So then why are you so focused on how he or she was speaking when they delivered the information? The point here is, do they understand the information? Do they know the information? Were they able to communicate that information to you? So why are you more concerned with how they said it versus what was said?
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
And it's important to be able to have those types of conversations, especially with my K-5 staff members, because that's the foundational area. And right. Children need to be comfortable and feel safe in those spaces.
Yes.
Because that's their foundational experience.
Right.
So it's critically important to help teachers understand that the way that they approach assessing how children retain information, can communicate that information on demand, is important. So focus on your goal, which is to educate them, and be less concerned about how they're speaking, the slang, whatever it is that the high fives, or whether they're doing whatever dances they're doing, or, don't be so focused on that. Be more focused on, conveying the information. Are they getting it? Are they retaining it? Are they learning?
Or
that should
utilize that to help them learn.
Yes.
That's what I would call
exactly.
Instruction, right?
Yes.
Right.
Capitalize on what they enjoy, and then use that as a tool to help you make connections with them.
Yeah. I quickly learned the safe space to drop my endings was at the safe space to alter the verb to be was at home. We didn't bring our she be, he be, we bees to the classroom, right? But it was easy to code switch as soon as we got into our homes.
They feel free when they're in the cafeteria, when they're on the playground, when they get on the bus at the end of the day. there's a feeling of freedom.
Right.
Like I've been released. I can let it all go now.
Yeah.
But we want them to feel that sense of freedom in school as well. So we really need to, capitalize and cultivate their uniqueness so that they feel comfortable all day long.
Right. And that's a lot of hours to feel
Yes.
that level of, discomfort and not being able to feel free.
Yes.
Right.
The most vibrant hours of their day that they're not feeling stifled. Brandon, there was a comment that said you should be paid more for having to explain all of those things to so you write that in the next review when you get an opportunity to write down.
Right.
Yeah.
Run me my money, right?
Yeah. So, Brandon, what would it look like to reimagine the institutions of higher learning beyond what you see now in terms of the experience that the students that you work with have?
Okay. I think it would start with the access piece, and then the recruitment piece of recruiting students who may need that, because we understand that every institution is not going to be an Ivy League institution. Some institutions are going to be access students for students who may be first generation low socioeconomic students. So building or changing the culture of higher education to be conducive to building those students up academically and being there, because the population of students that I work with in my program, 96% of them look like me. Right. So I coordinate the bridge program. So these are students who were denied admissions to the university. And like I said, 98% of them look like me. And so in my program, I am tasked with understanding the student. Some people say I'm a babysitter, but that's fine. My students are successful.
You meet them where they are, right?
Exactly. And they know if they come in my office, I'm now what's going on here? And I'm going to use my Black vernacular in that moment with
Right.
my students, because that's what they understand. That's what makes them feel comfortable. And instead of putting up a wall, or instead of I don't want to say now, I won't say that. But like you said, meeting them where they are. Dr. Nita, I'm still learning how to be socially and politically correct in some of the things that I say. But yeah,
I'm curious as to what you were gonna say.
I'll DM it to you. But yeah, on a serious note, building the structure, not so much, because we understand the colonial colleges were built by white men who were alum from Oxford and Cambridge and established Harvard in 1636. And so that became the standard of the American institution. And now you have students who the institutions weren't built for, now going to these predominantly white institutions that still have colonial roots, and still, they're flowing in the evolution of systemic racism, that these institutions weren't built for them to be successful. And some of them were built for just a checkbox, going back to the previous things that we said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would agree. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. The importance of I like what you said about when you close the door, you meet them where they are, and they have that safe place with you. I remember when I was in education, and I was fresh out of college, and I was teaching in this white district, and there was 150 some odd staff, and there were three of us who were Black. Two of them, one was a home economic teacher, the other one was a sewing teacher, and I was doing social studies. So I was the only academic teacher, and they were in their 50s and 60s, and I was literally like 23, 24. And I felt like I was the mother hen of this group of, there was probably in a school of 1,000, there may have been 50 Black kids. I felt like I had to keep all 50 of them under my wing and just protect them and bring them in the classroom and give them, I had a lot of internalized racism at that time. I'm giving them lectures and I'm talking, in my Black vernacular, but I'm saying, and when you get out here, you don't drop those endings and you don't do this and you don't do that and you don't give them reason to single you out. And I started to become so overwhelmed with trying to protect them and not have them look like. And it was a hefty, a huge responsibility that I felt like I was carrying just because I was the only one.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that brings me to the question: what is, or do you think we have a responsibility, not just as educators, but I talk each week about the privileged of us. What is our responsibility to those who are part of our community who are less privileged in terms of being able to move forward? What is our responsibility?
There are a number of movements in education. One that I'm most familiar with is Uncommon Schools.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission of Uncommon Schools is, specifically to uplift and benefit children of color, children from underprivileged backgrounds, and having an entire charter system designed around targeting the needs of the children from those communities, meeting those needs, and helping those children to excel and advance. So there's a lot to be said for those types of systems that operate outside of the public school norms. In addition to that, when we're talking about people with means, I think LeBron James has provided an excellent roadmap for us to use, for people of privilege to use, to establish schools and communities where we know children have been denied, because the foundation is rotten. So in order for us to continue to advance, to continue to move forward, investing in alternate systems is one of the ways that people of wealth and position and authority can assist in ensuring that we, children of color, children from our communities, have better access to, positive education opportunities.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us who have fled the community, so to speak, because we got better jobs, or we were able to go to different communities where our children are provided different education, that we not necessarily forget where we came from in terms
Yes.
of being able to go back and provide that necessary awareness or resources, or whatever we can do in our lane. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Brandon?
Yes, me and Dr. Johnson were talking previously, that it takes a village,
Yeah.
right? And then in my own personal experience, being one of four African American males on a predominantly white campus, it is my responsibility to have a young Black man graduate from this institution and say, well, Mr. Brandon, if it wasn't for you taking the opportunities out to have conversations with me during school, after school, helping me with my academics and with making sure that I'm well, monitoring my academics, all that good stuff, I would not have graduated. Having those closed door conversations, these are the ways that I feel that I give back, and it is my responsibility to students of color, because I want to be the example. I want to be the one that's an advocate for you. Mind you, I love all of my students on my campus, but I make no apologies, as well as it's not a secret that I am here for my Black and brown students because there aren't many who look like them.
All right.
And many of them do not come from, sheltered homes. Many of them weren't afforded education, proper education, so to speak, in school districts. So it's my responsibility to them because someone took a chance on me that looked like me and was able to help me build my academic resilience. They were there to help in my retention in school and encourage my persistence. So these are the things that I want to be able to give back to the next generation that's coming through higher education in any way that I can.
That's good, Brandon. That's excellent.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking about, again, the professor that I was listening to earlier. He talked about how, as educators, as Black educators, even though we have a curriculum that's handed, and again, I was an educator, so there's a curriculum that was handed to me, there's curriculum that's handed to Black educators, but that does not keep you from putting, adding or, altering what needs. Be bold enough, be courageous enough to say, this is what these kids need. And it doesn't mean that you have to completely deviate from the curriculum that you've been handed, but making it, again, individualized, for and to meet the needs of those Black and brown children. He wrote a book. I don't know if this is the exact title, but the book, Sumo Wrestlers and Supermodels. And he talked about how you don't train, a sumo wrestler. You don't take a supermodel trainer to train a sumo wrestler, because if a supermodel trainer trains the sumo wrestler, and teaches them to eat like you would teach the supermodel to eat, or teaches them to walk the runway or whatever, they're going to be annihilated when they get on the mat, right? And then the other way around, the supermodel is going to look a hot mess if she's been trained as a sumo wrestler. And so he used that as an analogy to say to, Black educators, stop taking the white dominant, curriculum and method of educating, and you have experience, you have your Black experience, give it to them, help them to be able to, find that, value, and be able to feel those experiences of wow, when you are, as a Black educator, sharing lived experiences, sharing, history that they can be proud of. And so I think that is, instead of punking out, I think a lot of educators, oh no, well, I got to stick to the, and we're going to test them, and we're going to this, and we're going to that, and the children just miss out, on
Yeah,
real.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Your delivery is uniquely stylized to your personality. The curriculum is one thing. What's on the paper is one thing. How you deliver it,
Yes.
and the tools that you use to deliver it are uniquely your own as a teacher facilitating instruction in that classroom. So that is where we, as educators of color, can take advantage of our unique cultural experiences and share those experiences with all of our students, because that is the one area that no one can mandate. No one can
right.
mandate your personal style, your tone, the prosody, how you deliver, the way you engage. That's all your personal style. And so you have that latitude to bring in components that supplement what you're doing, that check all the boxes in that curriculum, but provide children with the unique opportunity, especially children of color, as teachers and educators of color, providing them with that unique opportunity to engage with them personally on a level that they're not going to experience in an environment where they may have a white teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, Brandon, you shared those things that you're committed to, and, I appreciate you sharing that. As we come to a close of our episode on tonight, Joanne, you are in a very unique position, an advantaged position as an
Mm-hmm.
administrator, curriculum developer. you shared a few things as it relates to, what you're committed to or what we can do moving forward.
Mhm.
If you wanted to share anything else before we come to a close, I want to give you that opportunity, and then we'll say a few things and end our episode for the evening.
Certainly. As we have the anti-racism conversation, the equity conversations, the cultural awareness conversations, one of the things that my position affords me the opportunity to do is engage with vendors, publishers,
Mm,
textbook providers, the vendors that provide those resources and teaching tools to school districts. And I do take advantage of that opportunity to speak with my local representatives, because at the same time, while they're trying to make a dollar, they're trying to sell you their product.
right.
So I'm in a unique position to say to them, well, if I buy your product, this is what I want with that purchase. Or when I read a textbook, because I do try to read all of my social studies textbooks, when I'm reading the textbook and I see something and I say, I don't think that is accurate, and I can
Mhm.
pick up the phone and have a conversation. And just to give you an example, recently we were my third grade students, we were getting ready to do an immigration unit, and we purchased a new textbook. And as I'm reading some of the summaries, I'm looking at them and I'm like, yeah, we didn't all come here for opportunities. So publishers sometimes have a tendency to generalize
Mhm.
and use absolutes, all, we, us.
Yeah.
And our experience as African Americans, as Black people in this country, is unique. We did not come here
Right.
to expand our opportunities. So you have to be careful how you write the textbooks. And I picked up the phone and I made the call and I sent the email, and now I'm involved in rewriting that chapter.
Wow.
Oh yes. So that is how I am contributing. At the same time, as I come to the end of my career as an administrator, I look forward to going back into the classroom, because I will retire fairly young, and going back into the classroom in an area where we know people of color are sorely lacking, and that is in the high school sciences. So I
Yeah.
look forward to that next chapter, and being able to contribute and be a beacon in that space as a physics slash chemistry teacher in my next career.
That's awesome. That
Yes.
answered my question earlier. I said I don't really understand how information gets into textbooks. I didn't realize that the educators could have so much influence on
Yes.
on the text that their students actually get into their hands. So that's really good. That's
Yes.
good information that you shared on tonight. Well,
Mhm.
as Brandon, if you want to share in your closing remarks, if you have anything that you want to add before we close out.
Um, I'm just thankful for this opportunity. Like Dr. Johnson, like yourself as an educator, being able to be that person or that advocate for Black and Brown students it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's definitely, like I said before, our responsibility. But yeah, each one teach one, right? And it takes a village to raise a child. So
Yes.
those are my final remarks.
Bring our village back, a village that we can trust, and that whole concept, so that we can move forward, as a people. I really appreciate the two of you sharing on tonight your expertise and your experience in this area of education and systemic racism. If any of you, as we were sharing, it's a lot of information was shared, experiences were shared, and I did see that some of you commented, "Oh, that happened to me as well," when I was talking about my experience with my guidance counselor. If
Mhm.
any of you are kind of like reminiscing on your experience, and you're feeling, a little bit of pain, and do some journaling, and definitely call someone, a professional, if you're feeling like you need to really work through some things, sometimes those types of pain can be what is keeping you from moving forward in a healthy and productive way in life. A lot of people don't understand how past hurts, past traumas, and the whole concept of racism in so many different areas of our life can keep you stuck from being able to move forward. So just take a moment to do some reflecting, sit, think, reflect on your past, reflect on where you are now, and just start to think: is something keeping me from being able to move forward in the things that I desire to do, the way in which I desire to be productive? And then I would also encourage you, as you have heard on tonight, we always talk about what can you do. You may not be an educator, but you can share information that was shared tonight. Share this particular live so that someone else can be able to hear it and get some level of education that they didn't have. And so that's our episode for tonight. Again, we thank you. We thank the viewers for joining us. We thank you, Joanne and Brandon, for sharing with us tonight. Thank you so much again. Enjoy your evening and your week. Good night.